This book is every genre. All of them. I finished it recently, and I told my sister this, and I challenged her to name a genre that it isn't. And she extremely confidently was like, Christian stories. I'm like, there's a priest's tale? Yeah, it's that. She's like, fine. Erotica. And I'm like, yep, soldier's tale. Got that too. Poetry? Yes, it's poetry as well. It is every genre. Sci-fi, fantasy, horror, romance, even the niche ones. Okay, for those who don't know, Hyperion is the sci-fi. It is sci-fi, it's just also a lot of other things. Classic by Dan Simmons, I think it came out in the 80s. The one pitch for it is it's like a retelling of the Canterbury Tales, but I don't know what those are, so I'm going to explain what it is differently. Basically, the general premise is there is a planet called Hyperion that in the north has like a temple that people will go on pilgrimages to, and 7 people go on the pilgrimages, 1 person gets something they want, and the other 6 die. And this starts, the Hyperion is going to kind of be lost, and this is going to be the last pilgrimage to Hyperion, and 7 people are chosen, and all agree to go on this pilgrimage where they have a 6 out of 7 chance of dying. They very quickly are like, what the, like, there has to be something that we all have in common, or we wouldn't have been chosen for this. Like, we 7 didn't get chosen for no reason, so they decide, on their way, on this pilgrimage, they're all going to share their story, and so they can try and figure out what it is the 7 of them have in common. And so you have this main narrative, which is the pilgrimage to Hyperion, which is the not as important stuff. And what the book is actually about is the people's backstory as they tell you their tale. And that is kind of the heart of the story. But one thing I do want to mention is the stuff that was happening in present time was fantastic. And the first thing I would like to give this book credit for is this book introduces quite a few characters extremely quickly. Like, it introduces 7 characters, like, instantly, and then each tale also introduces more characters. And I didn't forget who people were. And the reason I didn't forget who people were is how good Dan Simmons is at character voice. And when it has, you know, Kassad said this, the thing he said is something a soldier would say, and not something a priest, poet, scholar, Templar, detective, or consul would say. So I subconsciously very quickly learned which, like, title went with which person, and very rarely had to check this. And the same thing happened in the stories. The characters who got introduced would have such distinctive and, like, pop-off personality that I would very quickly remember who they were. Nice how that works. Definitely not throwing shade at a previous book here. That was one of my last reviews that made me sad. And I actually think I hadn't heard this. Dan Simmons, and keep in mind I have read Joe Abercrombie and Robin Hobb, may literally be the best person I've ever encountered at character voice. Quick interlude from Future Jake, which is actually, from my perspective, not Future Jake, and from your perspective is still past Jake, but you know what I mean. I think one thing that really shows how incredible Dan Simmons is at getting in his character's head is that if I were, like, go through my favorite Hyperion quotes, the first, like, chronologically, the first one or the second one of the ones from the Priest Tale, might make you, some people just dismiss this book as it's just like a dude pushing religion. And then if I show you later quotes, people might dismiss it. It's like, oh, this is just an anti-religion book. But obviously it's both. Like, it's not just pushing religion or anti-religion. It's exploring the topic in a fantastically nuanced way. And it does that by getting in people's heads who see the topic so differently. And it's so well done. And you should read it. Yeah, I'm saying that. If he's not one, he's, like, in contention with one, with those other 2. The different voices and technique and writing styles he has for the various tales is just mind-bogglingly good. It's incredible. I think the poet, especially, and the Poet's Tale, may be the most entertaining and distinctive character voice I've ever encountered. And yes, I'm saying that beats people like Glokta and Harry Dresden and Kennett. Like, the command of voice and different writing styles for all the tales, but especially the Poet's Tale is where I think it's the most visible, was mind-bogglingly good. And the only kind of exception to this would be the Detective's Tale, and that's because the detective is kind of boring. Just as a character. Which is why... So there are the various tales, and the Detective Tale is my least favorite, because I just don't think... I think all the other characters are really interesting, and the detective isn't, which I think one criticism that you could give for Hyperion by Dan Simmons is that it's a sausage fest. The female characters in this book are lacking at best. Of the 7, there's one female character, and she's boring. And all the guys are not. So, that's just something you're going to have to go in expecting. I love the story so much that didn't end up bothering me that much, but it totally is a legitimate criticism. Like, if someone criticized Hyperion for this, they wouldn't be wrong. I'm trying to think, what female character would I respond with and be like, oh, but what about this amazing female character? And it's legitimately, it's not easy. There's not none, but they're just not nearly as prevalent. So, let's talk about the good things. This hit one of the highest peaks of any book I have ever read. The Scholar's Tale is a 10 out of 10 for me. Now, for those who know, I use decimal places, and I do not give 10 out of 10s out lightly. For me, a 10 out of 10 is I cannot imagine it being better. I do not give Words of Radiance a 10 out of 10. I do not give books like Fool's Fate a 10 out of 10. Demon in White. Love Demon in White. Didn't come close to giving me a 10 out of 10. Lines of Our Song. 9.5 out of 10. Scholar's Tale literally might be the best thing I've ever read. It's up there. It's up there with, the best parts of, Assassin's Fate. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but it is an emotional journey. It is both intellectually and emotionally ridiculously incredible. Next up is The Priest's Tale, which is what you start with, which is the most, horror of the books. For the first half, I was like, this is really good. And then the second half is, again, ridiculously incredible. A certain thing happens in The Priest's Tale, and then from then on out, it's basically as perfect as something I've encountered. The highs this book hits are higher than the highs of any book I have read this year other than Robin Hobb books. The reason this book is not, going to be second on my top books of the year is it does end with a little bit of a whimper. This is not a book of even quality. There are some books, you start them, and then you read them through, and it's every section was great. I didn't dislike any section of this book, but this was not a book of consistent quality. This was a book that would hit peaks that were insanely hard-hitting and emotional and well thought out. It would introduce world-building stuff that was incredibly creative. It would also have parts where you're just Dan Simmons, what the hell are you doing? What is this? I think the two weakest stories for me are The Soldier's Tale and The Detective's Tale. With The Soldier's Tale, the actual story of it is just it's extremely bonk. Dan Simmons. Bonk. Go to horny jail. The actual character, the soldier, I think is a fantastically written character. But the story of The Soldier's Tale is just I don't know. It was not interesting to me. But I still enjoyed reading it just because of how good Dan Simmons is at world building and character voice and character development. And then The Detective Tale is kind of the opposite. The story of The Detective Tale is pretty interesting. A guy walks into the detective's office and wants the person to investigate their own murder. What a fantastic start. This isn't spoiling anything before. This is just... What a great start. But the character, the detective, is just not interesting. They're just... their voice is so much weaker than all the other characters. So yeah, that is Hyperion. I would absolutely recommend Hyperion, but be prepared for weird things. You have to be ready for the weirdness, but if you are ready for the weirdness and for it to be, a little bit of a sausage fest in terms of the characters, then I would totally recommend this book. Dan Simmons is an incredible writer, and if you were to isolate the Priest's Tale, the Scholar's Tale, and the Poet's Tale, they would all be on my top book list of the year, especially the Scholar's Tale, which I'm still thinking about. Yeah, it's I love that so much. So it may be slightly uneven, but it is still a 9.2 out of 10, and it is going to be on my top book list, which I'm actually going to record when the year is over, because, if I record my top book list while I'm still reading Senlin, then all the Senlin fans will get mad at me. And I don't know, I want to actually make my list for the year when I've read every book I'm going to read this year. It's just the way I'm going to do it, for both bottom and 10. But this is going to be on the top section. I loved it, and thus will not throw it across the room. Sounds interesting to you, I'd absolutely recommend you pick it up. It is a classic for a reason, and I will be continuing the series in 2022. Bye, everyone.